born in 1964. Now that makes me the last of the so-called baby boomer generation, okay? A generation that was born and educated before the computer age. So by all rights, I really should not be giving you any kind of insights into the world of technology and what is going on around you. Having said that, by dint of experience, I spent my first 20 years of working life in the financial services sector. I then left the financial services sector when I was 40 years old to run for public office, and I was a member of parliament, in and out, not because I lose elections, but because we have coups every now and again in this country. At the moment, I'm in that interregnum. When the military is in charge, I still consider myself in public service, and in fact spent about 3.5 years as the country's Minister of Finance. Now, most of my working life, therefore, spent working in the area of finance. My natural interest, therefore, was obviously gravitating towards fintech, which is a growing segment of the local startup community here in Thailand, and definitely set to grow a lot bigger. Who the winner and who the loser will be, however, is an open question, and is something that, frankly, today nobody can give you a precise answer to. As Keenan mentioned, the startup community in Thailand is vibrant. It's more than a few years old, although the fintech space has only started to come into fruition roughly last year. In fact, last year we formed the Thai Fintech Association. I'm the current chair, and at the moment we have membership of a total of 58 fintech startups, but a total membership of around 150 members, including all incumbent financial institutions. The roles we seek to play in the Thai financial space will pretty much be determined partly by consumer reaction, partly by incumbent reaction, partly by regulatory reaction, and very much partly will be determined by the strategy of the big players, the big gorillas, such as Ant Financial, such as Tencent through WeChat and others. Thailand definitely is in a stage whereby it needs to grow through innovation. If you follow the news here in Thailand, you will see that the government has been pursuing a so-called Thailand 4.0 strategy. A lot of its action is inconsistent, obviously, with its intentions. I got here, for example, by Uber, which is still very much a challenge. The government has, in fact, pursued a strategy of search and destroy for Uber drivers over the past couple of weeks, but they persist, and I'm trying to provide them with as much moral as well as legal assistance as is possible. But nevertheless, I think most are in agreement that without innovation, we cannot increase the wealth and prosperity of our people. Thailand was one of the fastest growing economies in Asia for 30 consecutive years since the mid-1980s through industrialization. 1986 was in fact my first full working year, and that was the year that the manufacturing sector for Thailand outgrew the agricultural sector for the first time. And that process basically led to super rates of growth, which has raised national income from about $800 per head back in 1986 to about $6,000 per head today. Now the global average is closer to about 10,000, so we're still some way behind the world's average. The attempt to reach that level through the old economic model basically will be a difficult path. Economic growth rates has declined to barely 2%, closer to about 3% this year. In order for us to regain the dynamism that we had over the past 30 years, we need a new model, which is why there is so much official impetus and support for startups and the concept of entrepreneurism through technology and through startups that we see today. In the fintech space, if I may spend just a few minutes on that, as I said, we have strong incumbents. The banks are strong, the securities companies are strong, the insurance companies are quite strong. So in that, we are different from our immediate neighbors. As a result, many of our fintech startups have ventured out already through the likes of Myanmar, through the likes of Cambodia, where there is less legacy, less incumbent competition, and much less regulation, which allows them a freer hand in innovating and in providing the kind of service through their mobile apps, as opposed to what is possible here in Thailand. But within Thailand, we have one of the greatest mobile penetration amongst our population that exists in the world. And of our population, about 60% are currently served by the commercial banks. About 20% in addition are served by the state-owned banks, and about 20% of the remaining population are currently unbanked. Now, that's not a bad statistic, but if you look at Asia as a whole, you're talking about currently 1.2 billion people currently not serviced by any kind of financial institution at all. And there lies the opportunity. Of course, the biggest opportunity in fintech space is not here in Thailand, I have to say, but it is in China, where 750 million people are already online, and where the incumbent banks have never been competitive. And we're finding already that most people are transacting or making financial transactions through payments and other activities through so-called non-bank operators, such as Ant Financial, subsidiary of Alipay, to the extent whereby that the total amount of payments made online in China last year exceeded the total amount of payment online made in the United States by a factor of 50. 50 times more money passed through mobile apps in China than it did in the United States. And that's where we're going. Already we're seeing that the giant players, the big players in China, are devising a pan-Asia strategy. Yesterday, you would have seen in the news that Alibaba signed a contract with Maybank and CIMB in Malaysia for joint ventures. They already shook hands with a non-banking giant here in Thailand, CP, owners of the 7-Eleven franchise domestically, to provide e-commerce platform as well, I'm sure, as financial services. There are currently about 120 million mainland Chinese traveling overseas every year. Out of 120 million, about 10 million come to Thailand. Now that about 80 or 90% of those that travel from China to Thailand are current customers of Alipay. So what you're already finding is that these giant Chinese companies have a natural customer base in many countries around the world, and certainly a strong base of customers that exist for them already here in Thailand. So a step from here towards not just providing payment services to their countrymen traveling to this country, but providing the same payment system to locals is a very small step for them to take. So the question for startups really is where we fit in this. Initially, local banks were wary of the local startups. They saw them as a threat, but I think that has very quickly dissipated. And local banks and local fintech startups are now beginning to cooperate in the understanding that the much bigger threat is from outside. In fact, the very existence of local banks 5 years, 10 years hence is not necessarily going to be due to how local startups perform, but it will be the strategy and successful execution of the obvious plans of the likes of Alipay. How we adapt to that, how the local banks work with the local fintech startups is open game. uncharted territory. And from that perspective, also very interesting from the perspective of an investor. Perhaps I should give you a personal perspective. I am invested in a local fintech. It's a company called ReFin. What it does is it helps provide refinancing solution to Thais who have mortgages. There are 3 trillion baht of mortgages existing in Thailand. So it's the largest single block of debt that exists in the country. And of course, it's the best collateralized debt, highest quality kind of debt. Out of 3 trillion, we found that only about 60 billion were being refinanced each year, in spite of the fact that all 15 banks provide fantastic refinancing offers, reducing interest rates from 7%, for example, down to as low as 4.5%. And yet, very few people seek to refinance. A little bit of research indicated to us that the main problem was lack of access to information. The main problem was that even if they had access to information, there was a lack of financial knowledge and capability to calculate which deal from which bank is best for any single individual. So ReFin basically created a platform whereby an individual can access all deals and the system works out for them which deal is best and takes them to the most appropriate bank for subsequent refinancing. What we found was that interest from the consumer end was great. Every time we did a marketing pitch, we would have thousands, literally, of interested borrowers seeking refinancing. However, our success rate in executing, in actually helping customers refinance is in low percentage level of, say, around 15, barely 20%, even though these are all good customers who've never missed a payment for as many years as 3 or 4 years of being in debt. And you have to ask the question, why? The problem in this particular model is that the fintech is still dependent on the efficiency of the local banks and in approving the refinancing. So meeting that challenge, we asked the question, how can we go around and do this for our customers without having to be dependent on the local banks at all? Can we do it through the capital markets, issuance of mortgage-backed securities? The answer is yes, that's being done. But the most interesting potential option for us, actually, is to present ourselves to a giant non-bank looking for entry into Thailand. Because what we can provide, the likes, for example, of Alibaba, is consolidation of customers that can be delivered to them in bulk. What they can provide is substantial financial resources. Alibaba and Tencent together are worth, what, 500 billion US dollars? That's 20% bigger than Thai GDP as a whole. So that capability in playing the game, if they seek to do so, is obviously very, very powerful. So from that perspective, once you start with an initiative, more often than not, you run into difficulty, problems that may not have necessarily been envisaged in your original business plan. But what is happening within the local startup community is that options, potential different roads that can be taken is opening up daily. And from that perspective, I would say that overall opportunities in startups, fintech obviously included, is very exciting. There are a lot of different kind of players potentially offering very different kind of solutions and exits to players and to customers alike. So it's a very interesting time for you to be holding this event. An interesting time for even somebody of my generation to be witnessing what is going on, not just in this country, but also in the region. I believe the major driver of innovation will be from Asia, without a doubt. And from that perspective, it's good that we are in the sweet spot of Asia, not least in this beautiful property that never knew existed. And from here, I think we can all achieve great things. Now, I understand that many of you are investors representing family money or venture capital funds. I think it's an interesting time for you to look at what is going on in Thailand, not least. I would add as a final comment that last year saw a big jump in the value of deals or funds raised in the startup community in Thailand. Total money raised in 2016 for Thai startups jumped about 150% from what was raised in 2015. Out of that, the majority, about 40%, went into the e-commerce space. About 10% went into fintech and different areas of startups. But we see this big jump in interest from those with money as part of an ongoing trend that is set to continue. So I encourage you to be part of it. I'm going to be sticking around for a little while after this, so if anybody have questions or any advice, please welcome to come up to me. Thank you very much.